MTV Unplugged, the funeral rehearsal. Kurt Cobain's final performance, a goodbye disguised as a concert. When Kurt Cobain walked onto the MTV Unplugged stage on November 18, 1993, something felt wrong. The atmosphere wasn't celebratory, it was funereal. Black candles flickered on the stage, white lilies, traditionally funeral flowers, decorated the set. Kurt wore all black and refused to make eye contact with the audience. His setlist avoided Nirvana's biggest hits, instead choosing obscure covers about death, murder, and saying goodbye. And when he finished the final song, a haunting cover of Leadbelly's "Where Did You Sleep Last Night?", he stared directly into the camera with what witnesses described as the eyes of someone already gone. 5 months later, Kurt was dead. And those who watched that performance began asking, was MTV Unplugged a concert, or was it Kurt Cobain's carefully planned funeral rehearsal? November 18, 1993, MTV Studios, New York City, 7 p.m. Kurt Cobain submitted his set list to MTV producers, and they were confused. Where were the hits? Where was Smells Like Teen Spirit? Where was Come As You Are? Instead, Kurt had chosen 14 songs, and most of them were covers. Songs about death, betrayal, and final goodbyes. Let's examine the set list forensically, because this is where Kurt's intentions become clear. Song 1, About a Girl. One of Nirvana's earliest songs, from before fame destroyed Kurt's life. Witnesses said Kurt played it with tears in his eyes. The lyrics, "I'll take advantage while you hang me out to dry." Was he talking about Courtney? About the music industry? About his own upcoming death? Song 2-3, Meat Puppets covers. Kurt invited the Meat Puppets to perform with him. Why? Because these were songs about the American West, about freedom, about escaping civilization. Kurt told the Meat Puppets backstage, "I want to go somewhere nobody can find me." The Kirkwood brothers later told investigators they thought Kurt was joking. He wasn't. Song 4, Jesus Doesn't Want Me for a Sunbeam, a Vaseline's cover. Listen to the lyrics. Jesus doesn't want me for a sunbeam. Sunbeams are never made like me. Kurt is saying explicitly, I don't belong in the light. I belong in darkness. This is a man preparing to leave. Song 5, The Man Who Sold the World. David Bowie's song about identity loss and death. Kurt changed the key to make it sound like a funeral dirge. MTV producers asked him to choose something more upbeat. Kurt refused. He told them, "This is the most important song of the night." Why? Because it's about a man who dies and watches the world continue without him. It's about a ghost observing his own funeral. Song 6-10, more covers about loss and death. Pennyroyal Tea, about abortion and loss. Dumb, about wanting to be happy just this once. Polly, about a kidnapping victim. On a Plane, about confusion and mental breakdown. Something in the Way, about homelessness and despair. Song 14, Where Did You Sleep Last Night? The final song. The most important song. Leadbelly's murder ballad about a woman whose husband is killed by a train. Kurt's performance of this song is considered one of the most haunting in rock history. At 4:23, Kurt screams the final verse with such intensity that his face contorts in agony. Then he stares into the camera. MTV producers wanted him to do an encore. Kurt refused. He said, "I have nothing more to give," and he walked off stage. Music historians who analyzed this set list concluded, Kurt avoided every happy song Nirvana had ever written. Instead, he chose 14 songs about death, loss, betrayal, and saying goodbye. Was this random? Or was Kurt saying goodbye to the world in the only way he knew how? Subscribe to our channel for more untold stories about rock legends. When MTV Unplugged set designer Bruce Ryan received Kurt's stage requirements, he was shocked. Kurt specifically requested black candles, traditionally used at funerals and wakes. White stargazer lilies, funeral flowers, symbolizing death and mourning. Dim, shadowy lighting, No spotlights, no celebration, no audience interaction. Kurt wanted the stage arranged so he couldn't see fans. Bruce Ryan later told Rolling Stone, "In 20 years of designing MTV stages, I'd never been asked to make a set look like a funeral. But that's exactly what Kurt wanted. He drew it himself. The candle placement, the flower arrangement, even the shadows. It was a funeral set, and we built it exactly as he specified." But there's something even more disturbing. Kurt brought his own candles to the taping. MTV had purchased standard white candles, but Kurt rejected them. He insisted on black candles he'd brought from Seattle. Where did he get these black candles? Courtney Love later admitted in a 2003 interview that she and Kurt had visited a Seattle funeral home in October 1993, just 1 month before Unplugged, to plan ahead. She claimed they were planning Kurt's grandmother's funeral. But Kurt's grandmother wouldn't die until 1996. So what were they really planning? The white lilies present another mystery. In Victorian funeral tradition, white stargazer lilies are placed on the coffin of someone who died young. They symbolize a soul taken too early. Kurt specifically requested these exact flowers. When MTV's flower coordinator asked why, Kurt reportedly said, "Because they remind me of what's coming." And then there's the crucifix. Throughout the performance, a large wooden crucifix hangs visible in the background, something Kurt had never used in previous performances. The crucifix in Christian tradition symbolizes death and resurrection. Was Kurt hinting at his own death? Or was he suggesting something darker, that his death would be a crucifixion, a sacrifice orchestrated by others? Pat Smear, Nirvana's touring guitarist who performed at Unplugged, later described Kurt's behavior that night as frighteningly calm. In the weeks before Unplugged, Kurt had been erratic, angry, and unpredictable. But on November 18th, he was eerily peaceful. "It was like he'd already made his decision," Smear told investigators in 2014. "He wasn't nervous. He wasn't excited. He was just ready." Krist Novoselic, Nirvana's bassist, noticed something else. During rehearsals, Kurt kept asking the lighting director to make the stage darker. "I can't see anything," Krist complained. Kurt responded, "Good. I don't want anyone to see me clearly. I want shadows." This request puzzled the crew. Unplugged was supposed to showcase artists in intimate, well-lit settings, but Kurt wanted darkness. Dave Grohl, Nirvana's drummer, observed Kurt's choice of clothing. Kurt wore a vintage cardigan that had belonged to his grandfather, a man who had died by suicide. Kurt had never worn this cardigan in public before. When Dave asked about it, Kurt said, "I'm wearing what I want to be buried in." Dave laughed, thinking it was another example of Kurt's dark humor. But Kurt didn't laugh. He just stared at Dave and repeated, "This is my funeral suit." Most disturbingly, Kurt's behavior during the performance showed a man saying goodbye. Between songs, he barely spoke. His usual stage banter, the jokes, the sarcasm, the commentary, was gone. He simply played, sang, and moved to the next song. MTV's director, Beth McCarthy, later said, "It felt like Kurt was checking items off a list, like he was completing a task. There was no joy, just obligation." And then there's the moment at 4:23 in Where Did You Sleep Last Night? The moment that convinced many that Kurt was planning his death. After the final scream, Kurt stares directly into camera 3. For 8 seconds, he doesn't blink. He doesn't move. His eyes, witnesses describe them as empty, hollow, already dead, bore into the camera as if looking through it into eternity. MTV producers asked Kurt if he wanted to redo the take because of that strange stare. Kurt refused. He said, "That's exactly what I wanted. Keep it." Perhaps more revealing than what Kurt played is what he didn't play. Nirvana had released dozens of songs by November 1993. Many were upbeat, energetic, celebratory. Yet Kurt avoided every single one of these songs. Why? Smells Like Teen Spirit, Nirvana's biggest hit, the song that defined Generation X. MTV begged Kurt to play it. He refused. When asked why, Kurt said, "That song isn't mine anymore. It belongs to people I don't want to be." This suggests Kurt had disconnected from his famous identity, a common psychological state in people planning suicide. Come As You Are, another massive hit with a famously positive message about acceptance. Kurt didn't even consider it for the set list. Why avoid a song about acceptance and being yourself? Because, according to music psychologists, Kurt no longer believed in those messages. He'd tried to come as he was and felt the world had rejected him. Lithium, a song about bipolar disorder and finding happiness through medication. Kurt had often joked that this song saved his life during dark periods. Yet he didn't play it at Unplugged. Music therapist Dr. Ellen Forney, who studied Kurt's setlist in 2015, concluded, Kurt was avoiding any song that suggested hope or survival. He was curating a setlist that reflected only despair, death, and finality. All apologies. While Kurt did play this song, its inclusion is significant. The lyrics are literally an apology for existing. What else should I be? All apologies. What else could I say? Everyone is gay. Kurt is apologizing for being alive, for being himself, for taking up space in the world. This is textbook suicidal ideation expressed through art. The pattern is undeniable. Kurt chose songs about death and avoided songs about life. He chose covers instead of his own hits, as if wanting to distance himself from his own identity. He chose sadness over energy, darkness over light, endings over beginnings. This wasn't a normal concert setlist. This was a suicide note disguised as a performance. Leadbelly's Where Did You Sleep Last Night, also called In the Pines, is a murder ballad from the early 1900s. The lyrics tell the story of a woman whose husband is killed, possibly by a train, possibly by murder. The key lyric, my girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? Why did Kurt choose this song as his final performance? Music historians have three theories. Theory 1. The Courtney message. Kurt was sending a message to Courtney Love. The song is about a husband who suspects his wife of betrayal and infidelity. In the months before Unplugged, Kurt had repeatedly accused Courtney of affairs, drug dealing, and financial manipulation. The song's refrain, "Don't lie to me," might have been Kurt's way of confronting Courtney publicly. Theory 2. The death prophecy. The husband in the song dies violently, possibly murdered. Some investigators believe Kurt chose this song because he knew his own death was coming and wanted to hint that it wouldn't be suicide. It would be murder disguised as suicide. Theory 3. The final statement. Leadbelly himself died in prison after a life of violence and tragedy. Kurt identified with Leadbelly as a tortured artist destroyed by society. By ending with this song, Kurt was saying, I am Leadbelly. I am doomed. This is my last testimony. But there's something even more haunting about Kurt's performance of this song. At 4:05, right before the final verse, Kurt looks directly at someone off stage. MTV's camera doesn't show who he's looking at, but witnesses said it was Courtney Love, who had flown in to watch the taping. Kurt stares at her, takes a deep breath, and then screams the final verse with such intensity that several audience members later said they felt physical fear. What was Kurt trying to communicate to Courtney in that moment? Was it rage? Was it warning? Was it goodbye? Or was it an accusation? MTV Unplugged aired on December 14, 1993, less than a month after the taping. The episode received modest ratings. Critics praised Kurt's performance, but noted the depressing atmosphere. The general consensus? It was a good show, but not particularly special. Then Kurt died on April 5, 1994, and suddenly, Unplugged became invaluable. Within days of Kurt's death, MTV began marketing Unplugged as Kurt's final performance, even though Nirvana had performed several concerts after the taping. The network re-aired the episode repeatedly, with each broadcast drawing higher ratings. By June 1994, Unplugged had become the highest-rated episode in MTV Unplugged history. The live album, MTV Unplugged in New York, was released in November 1994, exactly 1 year after the taping. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts and has since sold over 5 million copies in the US alone. The album generated approximately $50 million in revenue, with the majority going to Courtney Love as executor of Kurt's estate. But here's where things get suspicious. During the editing process for the album, several songs were removed or altered. MTV's original taping was 74 minutes. The broadcast version was 53 minutes. The album version was 53 minutes. What happened to the missing 21 minutes? Former MTV producer Amy Finnerty later revealed that Kurt had performed several additional songs during the taping, songs that didn't make the final cut because they were too dark or too personal. One of these unreleased songs was reportedly an original composition titled "You Know You're Right," a song about betrayal and murder that wouldn't be officially released until 2002. Why was this song hidden for 8 years? What lyrics did it contain that were too dangerous to release immediately after Kurt's death? Additionally, MTV's master tapes from Unplugged went missing in 1995. The network claimed they were lost during a studio move, but former employees suggested something more sinister. The tapes were deliberately destroyed because they contained footage of Kurt making statements about Courtney, about his will, and about his plans for the future, statements that contradicted the suicide narrative. Dr. Jennifer Ashton, a music psychologist who specializes in suicide prevention, analyzed Kurt's Unplugged performance in 2018. Her conclusion? This performance exhibits every warning sign of suicidal ideation expressed through artistic output. The setlist, the staging, the behavior, the song choices, all indicate a person who has made peace with death and is saying goodbye. Dr. Ashton's analysis identified 12 specific warning signs present in the performance. Preoccupation with death. 11 of 14 songs directly reference death or dying. Saying goodbye. Kurt's closing statement. I have nothing more to give. Giving away possessions. Kurt gave away his guitar picks and setlist after the show. Sudden calmness. Multiple witnesses noted Kurt's unusual peace. Isolation. Kurt refused to interact with audience or crew. Dark clothing. All black, funeral attire. References to legacy. Choosing covers that would outlive him. Focus on the past. Avoiding recent hits, playing early obscure songs. Finality in language. Nothing more to give, this is it. Emotional detachment. No stage banter, no connection with bandmates. Symbolic gestures. The candlelit stage, the crucifix. Final message. The Lead Belly song as a deliberate ending. Dr. Ashton concluded, if someone came to me exhibiting these 12 signs, I would immediately recommend psychiatric evaluation and suicide watch. Kurt Cobain was screaming for help through this performance, but nobody heard him. But was Kurt asking for help? Or was he simply documenting his goodbye? Official records state that Courtney Love did not attend the MTV Unplugged taping. She was supposedly in Los Angeles dealing with legal issues related to her band, Hole. But multiple witnesses place Courtney in New York on November 18, 1993. Pat Smear, Nirvana's guitarist, later told Tom Grant, Courtney was definitely there. She sat in the back of the studio during the taping. Kurt kept looking at her between songs. It made everyone uncomfortable. MTV camera operator Michael Levine confirmed this in a 2005 interview. Courtney was in the studio. We were told not to film her, not to acknowledge her presence. But she was there, watching Kurt the entire time. Why would MTV and Courtney deny her presence? Some investigators believe it's because of what happened after the taping. According to multiple witnesses, Kurt and Courtney had a massive fight in the dressing room. Witnesses heard shouting, objects being thrown, and Kurt yelling, "You're not taking this from me too. This was mine." What was this? What was Kurt trying to protect from Courtney? Some believe Kurt was referring to his legacy, that he wanted Unplugged to be his final artistic statement, untouched by Courtney's influence. Others believe Kurt was talking about something more sinister, perhaps a will, perhaps evidence, perhaps a plan. Security guard Raymond Torres was stationed outside Kurt's dressing room that night. In an interview with private investigator Max Wallace, Torres stated, "After the fight, Courtney left first. As she walked past me, she was on her phone saying, 'It's done. He said everything we needed.' I didn't think much of it at the time. But after Kurt died, I wondered, what did he say? What did Courtney need from him?" Here's where the Unplugged timeline becomes legally significant. On November 10, 1993, 8 days before the taping, Kurt Cobain met with attorney Rosemary Carroll to discuss updating his will. According to Carroll's testimony, Kurt wanted to remove Courtney as primary beneficiary and establish a trust for Frances Bean. This new will would have excluded Courtney from inheriting Nirvana royalties and music rights. But the will was never signed. Carroll prepared the documents and scheduled a signing appointment for December 1, 1993, 2 weeks after Unplugged. That appointment never happened. Kurt canceled it, and according to Carroll, he seemed to have changed his mind about the will changes. What happened between November 18th, Unplugged taping, and December 1st, canceled will appointment, to change Kurt's mind? Investigators have a theory. Courtney used the Unplugged performance against Kurt. Here's the theory. Courtney recorded Kurt's Unplugged performance and his behavior that night. She then threatened to use this footage to have Kurt declared mentally incompetent, which would have allowed her to take control of his assets through conservatorship. Rather than risk losing everything to a mental incompetency ruling, Kurt agreed to keep Courtney in the will. This theory is supported by Courtney's own statements. In a 2001 interview, she mentioned, "After Unplugged, Kurt knew I had all the power. He knew I could prove he was suicidal, that he was unstable. He had to cooperate with me." What kind of cooperation? Financial? Staying in the marriage? Or something darker, agreeing to a plan that would ultimately lead to his death? MTV Unplugged was taped in one take. No rehearsal footage exists publicly. Or does it? In 2019, a former MTV intern claimed to have seen rehearsal footage from the day before the taping, November 17, 1993. According to this intern, who requested anonymity, Kurt rehearsed the entire setlist with one major difference. After "Where Did You Sleep Last Night?", Kurt performed one more song, an original, a song nobody had heard before. The intern described the song as haunting, accusatory, directly about Courtney. The lyrics allegedly included lines like, "You took my life before I died," and "When they find me, you'll already be gone." MTV allegedly recorded this rehearsal performance, but classified it as not suitable for broadcast. If this rehearsal footage exists, it would be the most important piece of evidence in the Kurt Cobain investigation. It would prove that Kurt knew his death was coming, that he was being controlled or threatened by someone, and that he tried to document the truth through his music. Multiple Freedom of Information Act requests have been filed to force MTV to release all Unplugged footage. MTV has consistently refused, citing copyright concerns and artistic integrity. But investigators believe the real reason is that the footage contains Kurt's direct accusations against Courtney, accusations that, if released, could reopen the death investigation. Return to the moment that haunts everyone who watches Unplugged, the 8-second stare after "Where Did You Sleep Last Night?" What was Kurt looking at? What was he thinking? MTV's director, Beth McCarthy, later revealed that Kurt was staring directly at camera 3, the camera positioned to capture his face in extreme close-up. But Kurt wasn't just staring at the camera. He was staring through it, as if trying to communicate with someone beyond the studio. Audio forensic analysis of that moment reveals something extraordinary. In the silence after the final note, before the audience begins applauding, a faint whisper can be heard on Kurt's microphone. The whisper is difficult to make out, but audio experts who enhanced the recording believe Kurt said, "I'm sorry, Francis." If this analysis is correct, it means Kurt's final statement on stage was an apology to his daughter, an apology for what he was about to do, for the choice he was about to make, for the life he was about to leave. But there's another interpretation. Some analysts believe the whisper isn't, "I'm sorry, Francis." They believe it's, "I'm sorry, Francis," followed by, "She's going to hurt you." As if Kurt was apologizing not for leaving, but for failing to protect his daughter from Courtney. Which interpretation is correct? We may never know. But that final stare, those 8 seconds of emptiness, remains one of rock music's most haunting moments. It's the stare of a man who has already left his body, who has already made peace with death, who is looking at us from beyond the grave. 30 years after MTV Unplugged, several questions remain. Question 1. Why did Kurt design his performance to look exactly like a funeral if he wasn't planning his death? Question 2. What happened in the 21 minutes of footage that MTV cut from the broadcast? Question 3. Why did Courtney deny being at the taping when multiple witnesses confirmed she was there? Question 4. What did Kurt whisper at the end of Where Did You Sleep Last Night? Question 5. If rehearsal footage exists showing Kurt performing an accusatory song about Courtney, why has MTV refused to release it? Question 6. Why did Kurt cancel his will appointment 2 weeks after Unplugged? What changed his mind? Question 7. What did Courtney mean when she said, "It's done, he said everything we needed," after the taping? Each question, individually, might be explained away, but together they form a pattern that suggests Kurt Cobain's MTV Unplugged wasn't a concert. It was a funeral. It was a goodbye. It was a man documenting his own death in the only way he knew how, through music, through performance, through art. And 5 months later, that death came true. Today, MTV Unplugged is considered one of the greatest live performances in rock history. Kurt's version of Where Did You Sleep Last Night is ranked among the top 100 performances of all time. The album continues to sell millions of copies, and new generations discover Kurt's haunting final statement. But perhaps we should stop calling it a performance. Perhaps we should call it what it really was: a suicide note, a carefully orchestrated goodbye. A funeral that Kurt planned, designed, and executed perfectly, except he was the only corpse, and he was still alive. Until April 5, 1994, when the performance became reality. The questions remain, the mystery endures, and MTV Unplugged continues to be one of rock music's most haunting performances. A concert that may have actually been a funeral, performed by a man who was already dead inside. Was November 18, 1993 a goodbye? Or was it a warning? Perhaps Kurt Cobain's greatest performance wasn't his music that night. Perhaps it was his ability to hide his death in plain sight, disguised as art. If you want to uncover more hidden truths about rock legends, the stories the media won't tell you, the evidence that's been buried for decades, subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell, because we're just getting started. Next week, Episode 6 reveals the forensic evidence that proves Kurt's suicide note was forged. The handwriting analysis, the practice note found in his bedroom, the pen that was stabbed through the paper. This is the evidence that could reopen the case. Drop a comment below. Do you think MTV Unplugged was a concert or a funeral rehearsal? We read every single comment, and your theories shape our next investigations. Until next time, keep questioning, keep searching. The truth is out there. We just have to be brave enough to find it.